Final words, give strategically, geographically, by function. You know, think. If you're married, talk about it. That's what Ray and I do. And some things we say no to. God does not urge us to give. There's a letter lying on our counter at home right now from a visit last week by an organization. Will you give? And God has not said for us to give. It's not an automatic yes. It's not an automatic no. Give strategically. And then this last piece came from my mentor out on the West Coast who said every time God talks about giving in the Bible, he always includes the poor. Now, I haven't checked every verse, but I think he's probably right. In fact, somebody in the Sunday class said that was in the Treasure Principle book. Did anybody read that or remember that? That Randy Alcorn says that. Wherever God talks about giving, the poor. And then Jesus said, the poor are always going to be there. Given to the poor. Not just to the big projects that everybody notices. God always includes it in his talks about giving. Now, here is a warning that needs to be in your mind when you're making decisions about giving. And it's this. Look for the ECFA symbol. Fellowship is a member of the Evangelical Council on Financial Accountability. Nancy, you could give a better rundown on this, but I'll give it simply, that if an organization, 501c3, is a member of this, they are saying, one, our books are open to be reviewed by the organization at any time. We're not playing games. We're not cooking the books, cooking the numbers on it. We're doing what we say with the money that's come in, etc. So the books are open. Two, the organization says we are willing to divulge the salaries of the top leaders in the organization. That's because of abuse that's out there. Okay? They're saying our books are open and we're not overpaying to the abuse of our donors. And there's some other ethics that are followed, as well as a statement about evangelical beliefs, etc. Now, why is this organization necessary? You may recognize the name Charles Grassley, senator from Iowa. He was asked by the IRS and the Senate to head up a group that would look into the abuse by Christian organizations in our country with monies that are sent in. And that's because of ministries, and they are oftentimes, headed up by a personality who are taking money offshore, not doing what they say with the money, and the government said, can we first ask those people to self-police themselves, Christian organizations, police themselves before we come in with more government regulation, ECFA. So if you get a solicitation for a donor request, look for that little symbol, ECFA. It's the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval for Christian organizations. Now, there's one caveat that I should mention. There may be organizations, I have a friend that works for one, a mission organization called Faith Comes by Hearing. They are not a part of ECFA, and I ask him about that. Some organizations, if you know them personally, either the person or the organization, know the ministry they do and have confidence in it, there may be an exception. But boy, this is a basic rule. Go with an organization that's willing to, go public and say, we're honest with our money and our giving. Now, saving, we're just going to spend a little bit on this because lesson 5, we spend a long time on investment, saving for retirement, but just some principles here at the end. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there are only 3 places our money goes, either through giving, into savings, or spending going out from us. Here's a biblical principle from Solomon, Proverbs. The wise have wealth and luxury. Fools spend whatever they get. Those are not Don Reed's words. That's God. I didn't call you anything, if you don't have any money. But again, are we willing to follow what God says? His ways are better than our ways. Our core verse, Romans 12:2, what does it say in the last phrase? If we'll do it God's ways, not conform to the world, but transform, then we'll find what the good, perfect, and pleasing will of God is. We're going to find the better way. It goes back to the chart that we looked at the beginning of class. The green column is the better way. Doesn't mean you're wealthy, just means a better quality of life, being a better steward along the way. How does that work out practically? One, short-term saving, an emergency fund cash buying reserve. We'll see in a minute in the third point here why this is so important. But the first thing is to get some account somewhere that's available, liquid, cash, that you can dip into at any time. When the refrigerator breaks, when the transmission goes out, when the kid gets sick, when you get laid off unexpectedly, that you have some money available. How many people I've talked to over the years who, when that happens, they said, we had to go on credit cards. Then they end up with credit cards of thousands of dollars and have never been able to pay it off. And it starts right here with no emergency fund or cash reserve. Minimum need, $1,000. What happens when the refrigerator breaks or the tires have to be replaced? Well, they may cost $300 or $600, whatever. You take it out of your cash, then you go back to rebuilding that up to $1,000. You keep a balance of $1,000 or better, 3 months living expenses, especially in our culture. You can't get a job tomorrow for most people if you lost your job today. And our country is rife with people who are in debt and have borrowed against their retirements and their 401ks and burned through all of it because they did not have reserve. And by the way, our couple that we saw on the Miracle in Franklin, they had a reserve. When God said, give $10,000, it was there to give. Okay? And the joy that she shared at the end starts out with that cash reserve. Many people are always in debt because they have no emergency fund, no reserve. It starts with living below your means, having something to share with those in need, the principles that we have talked about. So that's short term. That's just get a base to operate out of so that unexpected expense do not automatically translate into crisis, family crisis. Then long-term saving. Major purchases, appliances, new car, new home. Retirement, we'll spend a whole lesson on that. Long-term saving, and we'll see a verse here in a minute on that. Long-term health care, that's a decision that needs to be made, especially as you get into the later years. And there are different ways to cover that, but somehow you're saving up for health care, whether you're paying a premium or you're self-insuring along the way. And then these fill-ins. A responsibility to your family when you start working. What was it, Karen, a week ago? Lamar had a session with our interns here of trying to underscore the need to, from the very beginning, start putting into your 401k, start depositing. And when you start working and earning an income. And then this very curious verse, and we're just about finished here in a minute or two. I don't know if you remember this verse, but it's really interesting to me. After all, children should not have to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. I'd never remembered reading that before. Now, the context of it has to do with passing the faith of Israel on to future generations. But it's interesting to think about it and see what's happening in our society. I was in a class in Denver a number of years ago, and it was right at the 2007-2008 downturn. And the teacher said, do you know that boomers are not concerned about their retirement? I go, wow, I thought it was just the opposite. They just lost equity in their homes, equity in their investments, and I thought they're now on a rush to get their retirement built back up. So nope, it was in an article. I'll bring it to the next session. So sure enough, he marches in with his August 9th, 2013 USA Today. Boomers not concerned with their retirement. I go, what's the end? What's in the article? That doesn't make any sense. He said, here's what it says in the fine print. They're depending on their kids. I go, wow. Now, since that time, two of my pastor friends, one was in Chandler, Arizona. He at one time was our youth and music pastor in our first church, now up to retirement age, upside down in a house, couldn't afford, everything fell out. Finally, the government paid him $3,500 to get a U-Haul, load up all our stuff, get out of town, give it back to the bank, and he moved into the basement of his son's house in Seattle. Another friend of mine, North County, San Diego, was our pastor in church in Northern California before we moved here, where we attended, and the only reason that they're in a house today is because his son has signed for 25% of the mortgage. Now the verse says we ought to be saving up for our kids, but if we do poorly during our life, we will not end up there.